ආයුබෝවන්. So today in our reading lesson, we're going to have a look at the topic science, right? Practice question 1, aim of science. Read and complete the passage with words from the list below. ඉතින් මේ වචන ටික පාවිච්චි කරලා තමයි අපි gaps ටික complete කරන්න ඕනේ. So first, I want you to have a look at the words, right? Correct, hari gassanawa. Discover, aluth deyak hoya gannawa. Evolution, venas wena suluයි, right? Or it evolves, aluthen ennath puluwan. Experiments, athada balim, incorrect, වැරදි. Journal. So අපි කරන දෙයක් ගැන අපි යම්කිසි දෙයක් ලියලා තියා ගන්නවා නම් we have a journal of it, right? Laboratory, රසායනාගාරය, repeat, නැවත කරනවා, support, අවශ්‍ය කරන උදව්වක් දෙනවා, telescope, right? It's kind of like an instrument. You can see the sky, the stars, right? Test, අත්හදා බලනවා. Theory is අපේ යම්කිසි තියෙන theory එකක්. Undermine, අපි ඒ කරන වැඩේට අවශ්‍ය කරන වටිනාකමක් නෙවෙයි දෙන්නේ, ඊට වඩා ගොඩක් පහත් වටිනාකමක් දෙනවා නම් you say you undermine the work. Works වැඩ කරනවා. So I want you to fill in the gaps on your own first and then I will put up the answers. මොකද මේක ගොඩාක් difficult එකක් නෙවෙයි. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ලේසි එකක්. So ඉස්සෙල්ලා ඔයගොල්ලෝ තනියම කරලා බලන්න. The aim of science is to new facts about the world. Scientists discover new facts by making observations or by doing something. For example, astronomers like කියන්නේ ගගනගාමී, right? Might discover new facts by making observations through a පාවිච්චි කරන equipment එක. And chemists might discover new facts by doing experiments in a right? So I think these four are quite easy if you understood these words, right? An idea that explains why something is true or how something happens is called a scientific what? For example, Charles Darwin developed the theory of what? To explain how all the different species of plants and animals appeared over the time. Scientists then designed experiments and made observations in order to blank his theory, right? So altogether you have 6 blanks until now. The results of an experiment might support a theory or they might what? It. If scientists keep getting results that undermine a theory, they should accept that it is what? Okay. But if they keep getting the results that blank a theory, they should accept that it is correct. After thousands of experiments and observations that support the theory of evolution, for an example, it is now accepted as being blank. Right? So fairly, you should be able to complete all the gaps. කරන්න බැරි වුණා නම් මිස් වුණා නම් pause the video ආපස්සට ගිහිල්ලා බලලා complete the gaps before we have a look at the answers, right? Scientists who find new evidence that supports or undermines a theory should publish their results in a respected scientific journal, because you know that, because here it's something academic, so that's what I told you that you write down. Okay, so it could be a magazine, it could be an article, but here definitely these are called scientific journals, right? So I've given you a hint of 1. The evidence will only be accepted as valid if other scientists can blank the observation or experiment and get the same results. This is how science blank. Okay. So this gives you a good understanding, especially IELTS වලට gap fills එනවා. Right? ඉතින් summary completions එනවා. Words එක්ක එනවා, words නැතුව එනවා, words නැතුව ආවොත් paragraph එකෙන් අරගෙන කරන්න ඕනේ. But if you get the words, it's fairly easy. හැබැයි මෙච්චරම ලේසි වෙයි කියලා හිතන්න අමාරුයි. But මේක intermediate level එකක හින්දා it's fairly easy. Right? So if you have finished, we could now have a look at the answers. Right? First one is discover experiments, telescope because that's an equipment, laboratory, theory, evolution, test, undermine, incorrect, support, correct, journal, repeat, and works. Okay, so if you have got 14 out of 14, that means it's good. If you have made some mistakes, ගිහිල්ලා බලන්න ඇයි ඒක වැරදි කියලා. Because it should be fairly easy. The aim of science is to do what? Discover new facts about the world. අලුත් දේවල් සොයාගන්න එක තමයි science වල තියෙන main aim එක. So like that you should be able to just have a look at what your answers are. Okay? So scientists discover new facts by making observations or by doing මොන හරි එකක් කරන්න ඕනේ. මොකක්ද ඒ කරන්නේ? Experiments. There you are. Okay. For an example, astronomers might discover new facts by making observations through a telescope. මොකක් හරි equipment එකක් ඉන්න. So ඒ විදියට you have got your answers here. You discover experiments, telescope. Right? වචනේ තේරුම් ගන්නත් ඕනේ. ඒකට හිස්තැන ලියනකොට දැන් මෙතන reading passage එකක් නැහැ බලන්න. ඒ හින්දා ඒකේ gaps fill කරනකොට යම් කිසි තේරුමක් එන්න ඕනේ. Grammatically හරියන්නත් ඕනේ. ඒත් එක්කම you should be able to get some kind of meaning out of it when you complete the gaps. කිසිම තේරුමක් නැත්නම් that means that word does not fit there. Right? Okay, so with that we can move on into practice question 2, the experiment. අත්හදා බැලීමක්. Read the article and answer the questions. Right? ඉස්සෙල්ලා article එක අපි කියවමු. ඊට පස්සේ questions answer කරන්න පුළුවන්. Right? But actually IELTS ඔයගොල්ලෝ ගත්තොත් මගේ strong advice එක නම් skim කරන්න, scan කරන්න, ඉක්මනට බලන්න උඩේ මොකක් ගැනද මේක තියෙන්නේ. ඊට පස්සේ questions වලට ගිහිල්ලා keywords underline කරන්න. එතකොට Tamanට ඒක මතකේ තියාගෙන ටට්ටක් ගාලා skim scan කරලා උත්තරේ හොයාගන්න පුළුවන්. But because you're at an intermediate level, I always make sure that I do the reading with you so that you understand the vocabulary and then you kind of answer the questions. But අපි අනිත් පැත්තට කරොත් if you read this, underline the keywords and you feel confident to do it on your own, then of course that is completely okay, right? So what is the name of the tiny organism in the liquid, right? What is the purpose of the experiment? ඒ කරපු අත්හදා බැලීමේ purpose එක මොකද්ද? ඇයි ඒක කරේ? Why is the scientist careful not to disturb the cells? ඇයි ඒ ටෙස්ට් එක කරන විද්‍යාඥයා එච්චර පරිස්සමෙන් කරන්නේ ඒක cells disturb කරන්නේ නැතුව කරන්නේ ඇයි? What was the original ratio of bacterium to cells? How has the new liquid affected the cells? කොහොමද ඒක බලපාලා තියෙන්නේ? What will the scientists do next? scientist next. Okay, ඊළඟට මොකද්ද කරන්න යන්නේ? So with those questions in our mind, let's read through the reading passage completely, right? දැන් මම completely කියවන්නේ ඉස්සෙල්ලා කිව්වා වගේ ඔයගොල්ලන්ට තේරුම් යන්න ඕන. හින්දා but really if you have a skill begin එක ඔක්කොම කරලා if you have come up to now and you feel confident that you can skim and scan, please do so, right? In a laboratory, a scientist is adding small amounts of liquid to a container and measuring the temperature exactly. ඉතින් lab එකක් ඇතුලේ විද්‍යාඥයෙක් පොඩි ප්‍රමාණයක් liquid දාන container එකට ඒකේ measure කරනවා උෂ්ණත්වය හරියටම. They are trying to maintain a steady temperature. ඒගොල්ලෝ හදන්නේ ඒකාකාරී උෂ්ණත්වයක් පවත්වා ගන්න. The liquid contains a tiny organism. Liquid එකේ ඉන්න චූටි organism එකක්. It is a bacterium. Okay, so bacteria වර්ගයක් තමයි මේ liquid එකේ තියෙන්නේ. The scientist is counting the human cells in the liquid. ඒ liquid එකේ තියෙන මිනිසුන්ගේ තියෙන cells ප්‍රමාණය තමයි scientist ගණන් කරන්න හදන්නේ. They are trying to determine the subject's ratio. Determine කරන්න හදන්නේ බැක්ටීරියා එකක වර්ධනය වෙනකොට ratio එක කොච්චරද? ඒකට අනුපාතය කීයද? මිනිස් cells සහ බැක්ටීරියා එකේ අනුපාතය කීයද? The ratio of bacterium to human cells is 10 to 1, right? Bacteria cells 10කට human cells 1යි තියෙන්නේ. That is the ratio අනුපාතය. They are measuring the length and width of the cells. ඒ cell එකේ තියෙන දිග සහ පළල තමයි මනින්නේ. They are trying to determine how much the cells have grown. බලන්න හදන්නේ කොච්චරක් ඒ cell එක වැවිලාද නැත්නම් ඒක ලොකු වෙලාද කියන එක තමයි බලන්නේ. They are adding a little bit more liquid to the container. තව චුට්ටක් liquid container එකට දානවා. The scientist is very careful not to disturb the cells. හරි පරිස්සමෙන් දාන්නේ cell එක disturb කරන්නේ නැතුව. මොකද නැත්තම් ඊට පස්සේ cell එක disturb වුණොත් growth එක හරියට බලා ගන්න බැරි වෙන හින්දා. The scientist is now adding a different liquid to the container. දැන් container එකට වෙන liquid එකක් add කරනවා. They are trying to determine the effects of the new liquid on the cells. දැන් බලන්න හදන්නේ මේ අලුත් liquid එකෙන් cells වලට මොකද වෙන්නේ කියන එක. They think the cells might grow at a different rate. ඒගොල්ලෝ හිතනවා මේ අලුත් liquid එකක් දැම්මහම cells වැවෙන ප්‍රමාණය නැත්නම් growth rate එක වෙනස් වෙයි කියලා. The scientist is again taking measurements of the cells. ආයි පාරක් cells වල length and width එක measurement එක ගන්නවා. They really want to know how the new liquid is affecting the cells. ඒගොල්ලොන්ට ඇත්තටම දැනගන්න ඕනේ මේ අලුත් liquid එක කොහොමද cells වලට බලපාන්නේ කියලා. Suddenly the scientist understands. එකපාරට විද්‍යාඥයාට තේරුම් යනවා. The cells are growing at a different rate. Cells වැවෙන්නේ එක ප්‍රමාණවල වලට. They are growing much faster. ඊට වඩා ගොඩක් වේගෙන් වැවෙනවා. Oh my gosh, the scientist thought. They are growing too fast. ඒක වැවෙන ප්‍රමාණය වැඩි කියලා තමයි විද්‍යාඥයා පුදුමයට පත් වුනේ. Right? So with that understanding, what is the name of the tiny organism in the liquid? What is the name? Here. The liquid contains a tiny organism. So what is the name? Bacterium. Okay, so you could just write bacterium. Because they don't tell us to write complete answers. Just answer the questions. So we can write bacterium. Okay. It doesn't have to be capital B. You can write simple B, right? What is the purpose of the experiment? මේ කරන experiment එකේ තේරුම මොකක්ද? Well, they are trying to count the human cells in the liquid. They are trying to determine the subject's ratio, right? So I would say they are trying to determine the subject's ratio. Okay? They are trying to determine the subject's ratio. Why is the scientist careful not to disturb the cells? ඇයි එච්චර careful වෙන්නේ not to disturb the cells? Yeah. Because they are trying to determine how much the cells have grown. But they disturb වුණොත් ඒ වැවෙන ප්‍රමාණය හරියට බලා ගන්න බැරි වෙනවා. So they are trying to determine how much the cells have grown. So we can write because they were, or they are, because they say why is, because they are trying to determine because they're trying to determine how much the cells have grown. How much the cells have grown. Next one. What was the original ratio of the bacterium to cells? So it was, I remember, 10 to 1. The ratio was 10 to 1. The higher tekkai. How has the new liquid affected the cells? Alut liquid deka kohomada cells walata balapave. The cells are growing at a different rate. They are growing much faster. Okay? So you can write down the cells. Oops. The cells are growing at a different rate. They are growing much faster. So what will the scientists do next? I think they will try to take the measurements of the cells, right? So they will try to take the measurements of the new cells. Right, okay, so I think that's fairly easy questions tika to uttara tika, okay. So these are called short answered questions. මොන හරි passage එකක් කියවලා ඒක තේරුම් අරගෙන කෙටි උත්තර හැටියට උත්තර ලියන්න පුළුවන්. දැන් සාමාන්‍යයෙන් IELTS වල නම් you will get a word count. So you will get either 1 word, 2 words, 3 words. They will give you a word limitation. Right, so let's move on to the next question. Okay, so with that, practice question 3. A scientist and his chauffeur. Okay, let's read it to understand what this is about. Match up the terms from the passage with their synonyms or definitions, right? Right, so we've got a few words here to match. chauffeur, fed up, brilliant, expertly, show off, complicated. Right? මේ පැත්ත match කරන්න ඕනේ, but we'll have a look at the reading passage first. එතකොට මේක කරනකොට ලේසි. Right? A famous scientist was getting tired of giving lectures because he wanted to spend more time in his laboratory carrying out his important experiments. ඉතින් විද්‍යාඥයෙක්ට lectures දෙන එක හරිම මහන්සි කියලා හිතුණා. මොකද එයාට ඕනුනේ විද්‍යාගාරේ ඉඳගෙන අත්හදා බැලීම් කරන්න. One night, as they were driving to another lecture, he told his chauffeur that he was fed up with lecturing. ඉතින් එක දවසක් lecture එකට යන ගමන් කාර් එකේදී chauffeur කියන්නේ driver එළවන කෙනාත් එක්ක එයා කතා කර ගියා. දැන් නම් මට මේ lecture කරන එක එපා වෙලා තියෙන්නේ කියලා. I've got an idea, his chauffeur said. මට තියෙනවා හොඳ අදහසක් කියලා driver කිව්වා. I've heard you give this lecture so many times. I bet I could give it. මොකද chauffeur කියන්නේ මම ඔයා මේ lecture එක දෙනවා ගොඩ සැරයක් අහගෙන ඉඳලා තියෙනවා. ඒ හින්දා මට මේ lecture එක දෙන්න පුළුවන්. I look a lot like you. මම ඔයා වගේමත් පෙනුමත්. We both have white hair and a white mustache and we wear glasses. අපි දෙන්නටම සුදු කොණ්ඩයක් තියෙන්නේ, සුදු මුස්ටෑෂ් එකක් තියෙන්නේ, සුදු කන්නාඩි දාන්නේ. ඒ හින්දා what do you think? ඔයා මොකද හිතන්නේ? The scientist laughed and said, why not? Let's do it. Scientist කියනවා, අයි අපි එහෙම බලන්නෙත් කරලා බලමු කියලා කියනවා hina වෙලා. When they arrived at the lecture theatre, the scientist put his chauffeur's coat and cap on. Then he sat at the back of the room. ඉතින් lecture hall එකට ආවහම scientist මොකද කරේ? chauffeur ගේ driver ගේ තිබ්බ hat එකයි coat එකයි දාලා පිටිපස්සට වෙලා වාඩි වෙලා හිටියා. The chauffeur gave a brilliant version of the lecture and even answered a few questions expertly. driver මොකද කරේ? හොඳට lecture එක කරා ඊට අමතරව අහපු ප්‍රශ්න වලටත් හොඳට උත්තර දුන්න හොඳට දන්න කෙනෙක් විදියට. Expert කියන්නේ යම් කිසි දෙයක අති දක්ෂ කෙනෙක්. Right? So expertly කියන්නේ හොඳට නියමෙටම අපි කියන්නේ උත්තර දුන්නා කියලා අන්න ඒ වගේ හොඳටම උත්තර දුන්නා. Then a show-off professor asked an extremely complicated question to let everyone in the audience know how clever he was. Right? ඉතින් මොකද උනේ? Show off කියන්නේ නිකන් වැඩ පෙන්වන්න කැමති කෙනෙක්. We say, you know, she's a show-off person. Right? So වැඩ පෙන්වන්න කැමති වගේ ප්‍රොෆෙසර් කෙනෙක් මොකද කරේ? ඉතාමත්ම අමාරු complicated ප්‍රශ්නයක් ඇහුවා. Right? Without hesitating, the chauffeur looked directly at the professor and answered, Sir, the answer to that question is so simple that I will let my secretary who is sitting at the back answer it for me. මොකද driver කිව්වේ? පිටිපස්සේම වාඩිලා හිටපු ප්‍රොෆෙසර් දිහා බලලා කිව්වා මෙහෙමයි සර් ඔයා මගෙන් අහපු ප්‍රශ්නේ හරිම ලේසි ඒ හින්දා මගේ ඉන්න සෙක්‍රටරි පිටිපස්සේ වාඩි වෙලා ඉන්නවා මම එයාට කියනවා ඒකට උත්තර දෙන්න කියලා. Right? So with that we are going to have a look at the words and the meaning. Okay? Chauffeur කියන්නේ කාටද? Driver. So right. Driver. Okay? Fed up කියන්නේ එපා වෙලා, sick and tired. Brilliant කියන්නේ නියමෙටම, excellently, right? Expertly කියන්නේ හොඳ දැනුමක් තියෙනවා, knowledgeably. Complicated කියන්නේ ගොඩාක් සංකීර්ණ. Show off කියලා කියන්නේ වැඩ පෙන්නන එකට අපි කියනවා pompous. It's called pompous. Right. So let us have a look at the first question. Right. Now these are short answered questions. Right. So the first one. Why was he getting tired of his lectures? ඇයි scientist මේ lectures කරන එක මහන්සි උනේ? Right. Why? Because he wanted to spend more time in his laboratory carrying out important experiments, right? So we can write down because he wanted to spend more time in his laboratory carrying out important experiments. Right? When did he tell the driver that he was fed up with his lectures? කොයි වෙලාවෙද කිව්වේ යාට මේ lectures යන එක ඇති වෙලා කියලා? One night as they were driving to another lecture. So we can write down one night while they were driving to another lecture. What did the driver suggest the scientist to do? Driver මොකද්ද කිව්වේ scientist කරමු කියලා? He said, I've heard you give this lecture many times. I could do it. So what did the driver say? The driver said, that he could do it. The driver said that he could do it. Why could they swap? Swap කියන්නේ මාරු කරගන්න. Why could they swap their roles without the others knowing? ඇයි ඒගොල්ලන්ට පුළුවන් උනේ දෙන්නට තැන් මාරු කරගන්න? Why? Because they both have white hair, a white mustache, and they both wear glasses. Okay? Because they both look alike. They both have white hair, a white mustache, and wear glasses, right? What did the scientist wear taking from the driver? So what did he take and wear? He put on the chauffeur's coat and cap on, right? So what did he wear? He took the driver's coat and put on the cap. Okay. What did the driver do in the lecture hall? Driver මොකද කරේ lecture hall එකේදී? He gave a brilliant version of the lecture and answered all the questions expertly, right? So, he gave a brilliant version of the lecture and answered the questions expertly. What happened at the end of the question answer session? මොකද උනේ question answer session එකේ අග? A show-off professor asked an extremely complicated question. මොකද උනේ? Professor කෙනෙක් show-off වැඩ පෙන්නන්න කැමති කෙනෙක්. A show-off professor asked an extremely difficult question. Right? අමාරු ප්‍රශ්නයක් ඇහුවා. What smart reply did the driver give to the professor who was trying to show off? මොකක්ද එයා දීපු smart උත්තරේ? මොකක්ද දීපු උත්තරේ? He said that it was so simple that his secretary could answer it. Right? So, he said that it was such a simple question that his secretary could answer it. Right? Okay, so I think we have answered all the questions, right? And with that, we move on into practice question 4. Me and my brain. Okay? Read the text quickly and match the vocabulary with the correct definition and write A to F next to the numbers 1 to 6. A, B, C, D, E, F. You have 6 vocabulary there, so you have to match it with the meanings, right? To stem from, what is the meaning? To master something, what is the meaning? To witness something, what is the meaning? To wither, කියන්නේ ඒකේ තේරුම මොකක්ද? To reinforce something, to rely on. ඒකේ තේරුම match කරන්න, වචනවල තේරුම match කරන්න ඕනේ. So let's read the passage first. We all know that significant changes occur in our bodies during adolescence. Adolescence is when you're trying to kind of, from a teenage, you're trying to change into adult, that age, right? But have you ever stopped to wonder what's actually going on inside our brains during this time, right? ඉතින් ඒ transformation age එකේදී අපි ටිකක් අපිට අමාරුයි. හැබැයි ඇත්තටම අපේ brain එකේ මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ කියන එක අපි බලලා තියනවාද කියන එක තමයි අහන්නේ. To paint a clearer picture, we should first familiarize ourselves with the different parts of the brain. ඉතින් මේකේ හොඳ තේරුම් ගැනීමක් කරන්න නම් ඉස්සෙල්ලා brain එක අපි තේරුම් ගන්න ඕනේ. Did you know, for instance, that our brains are made up of billions of nerve cells called neurons? ඉතින් අපේ මොලේ හදලා තියෙන්නේ billions ගණන් cells වලින් ඒවට කියන්නේ neurons කියලා. And stemming from these neurons are several branch-like structures for sending and receiving electrical signals. ඉතින් here we have a neuron. ඒකෙන් stem වෙලා යනවා branches ගොඩක්, ඒවෙන් තමයි signals එන්නේ යන්නේ. Every time we do or think anything, a signal is transmitted. අපි දෙයක් කරනකොට හරි හිතනකොට හරි signal එකක් transmit වෙනවා. The signal travels down a long structure called the axon, and at the end it passes across tiny gaps called synapses to the dendrites of another neuron. Okay, so මෙහෙම ගිහිල්ලා axon එකේ ගිහිල්ලා අගට ගිහිල්ලා ආයි තව neuron එකකට යනවා. Which receives the signal. In this way, the message is sent across our neural network. ඉතින් එක neuron එකකින් තව neuron එකකට දාගෙන ගිහිල්ලා මුරු අපේ nerve system එකේම ඒක යනවා. Our brain structure changes dramatically as we grow up. ඉතින් අපේ මොලේ වෙනස් වෙනවා අපි වැඩෙනකොට. Newborn babies have almost all their neurons but few connections between them. ඉතින් බබාලට neurons ඔක්කොම තියෙනවා. හැබැයි ඒක අතර තියෙන connection එක නැතිම තරම්. Which is why they can't do very much. ඒ හින්දා තමයි වැඩි වැඩ කරන්න බැරි. After a few months, however, the number of connections explodes, which in turn helps tiny tots master a whole range of new skills such as walking and talking. ඉතින් මොකද වෙන්නේ? මේ neurons ටික ටික activate ටට්ටක් ගාලා activate වෙන්න පටන් ගන්නවා. ඔන්න එතකොට බබාලට කතා කරන්න ඇවිදින්න පුළුවන් වෙනවා. Despite earlier myths that most brain development is completed in the first few years, we now know that our brains continue to develop throughout our lives, and perhaps the most dramatic time of change and development is during puberty. ඉතින් මිනිස්සු ඉස්සරේක පොඩි කාලේ ඔක්කොම ළමයින්ගේ ඔළුව වර්ධනය වෙලා ඉවරයි කියලා. හැබැයි දැන් අපි දන්නවා රිසර්ච් කරලා එහෙම නෙවෙයි අපේ ජීවිත කාලය පුරාවටම ඔළුව හොඳට දියුණු වෙනවා මනස ඇත්තටම brain right දියුණු වෙනවා සහ වැඩිපුරම වෙනස්කම් එන්නේ අපේ puberty age එකේ. So that's when we say girls attend, right? So boys also have a similar change. අන්න ඒ කාලෙදි තමයි වැඩිපුරම වර්ධනය වෙන්නේ කියලා කියන්නේ. During this period of reorganization, the brain witnesses a sudden increase in neurons, not dissimilar to a plant growing uncontrollably in spring. ඉතින් එකපාරට එනවා පොඩි ස්පයික් එකක්. හරියට නිකන් ප්ලාන්ට් එකක් ග්‍රෝ වෙනවා වගේ අපිට වර්ධනය පාලනය කරගන්න බෑ වගේම තමයි මේකෙදිත් එන්නේ. Just as we prune a plant to make it stronger and healthier, we prune our brains. ඉතින් අපි කපනවා වගේ ගහක් හොඳට වැවෙන්න brain එක චුට්ට අපි prune කරන්න ඕනේ. prune කරනවා කියන්නේ ලස්සනට කපලා කොටලා වෙනස් කරගන්න ඕනේ. කපන්න බෑ brain එක, but through your thinking you can do that. The connections that are used become stronger, whereas those which aren't used wither and die. ඉතින් මොකද වෙන්නේ? අපි පාවිච්චි කරන connections හොඳට strong වෙනවා. හැබැයි අපි පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ නැතිව මෙහෙම දඟලලා මැරිලා යනවා. Right? So more frequently an action or thought is activated, the stronger connections become between the neurons, which in turn strengthens the part of the brain being used. ඉතින් අපිට ඒව ආවහම ඒක use වුණොත් activate වුණොත් තමයි ඒ action එක එන්න strengthen වෙන්නේ. This explains why more you do something, the better you become at it. ඉතින් ඒක තමයි අපිට explain වෙන්නේ අපි දෙයක් කරන්න අපි ඒකේ හොඳ වෙන්නේ මොකද to the brain it keeps on as a repetitive action. In fact, it would seem that the teenage brain provides optimum conditions for perfecting skills such as playing a musical instrument, speaking another language, or learning complex computer games. Right. So, ඒක තමයි අපිට පොඩි කාලේ සමහරක් වෙලාවට teenage වයසේදී අපිට perfect skills හදාගන්න පුළුවන් සමහරක් වෙලාවට instrument එකක් play කරන එක, වෙන භාෂාවක් කතා කරන එක, නැත්නම් complex computer game එකක් play කරන එක. It could therefore be argued that teenagers determine the development of their own grey matter through the activities and the experiences they engage in. ඒක තමයි teenagers ලගේ කාලේ හරියට ළඟින් ඒගොල්ලොත් එක්ක ඉන්නව නැත්නම් ඒගොල්ලොම ඒගොල්ලොන්ගේ activities තුර engage වුණොත් then they keep on repeating that kind of behavior, right? It may also be unsurprising to many to learn that the last part of the adolescent's brain to develop is the frontal cortex. ඉතින් ඒ කාලේ පුදුමයට පත් වෙන එක තමයි අපේ frontal cortex එක තමයි වැඩි දියුණු වෙන්නේ. Responsible for self control, problem solving and decision making. Consequently, long before teens become adept to rational, abstract thinking and logical decision making, they rely on the emotional center of the brain to make choices and think. So perhaps unpredictable, volatile, risk-taking teenage behavior, often put down to hormones, may actually have more to do with what's going on inside their brain. ඒක තමයි teenagers හරි spontaneous. හිතුන දේ කරා ටක් ගාලා කියන තියෙනවා because more than their hormones, it's what's working inside their brains, right? So that is why teenagers become difficult for us to control, right? It's not impossible. හැමෝට මේ face එක තියෙනවා. So just that we need to understand what is really happening with them. Hi. Okay, so let's go and match and see the meanings, right? To stem from. Stem from කියන්නේ actually to start from. To master something කියන්නේ එක දෙයක් හොඳට කරන එක. To learn to do something well. To witness something is to see something happen. E. To wither කියන්නේ weak වෙලා මෙහෙම වෙලා මැරෙනවා. To become weak. A. To reinforce something is to give strength or support to something. Okay. To rely on something is to depend. ඒ මත යැපෙනවා කියන එක. Right? Reinforce කරනවා කියන්නේ මොකක් හරි support එකක් නැත්නම් ආයේ දේ කරන්න ශක්තියක් දෙන එක. Wither කියන්නේ weak වෙනවා කියන එක. Witness කියන්නේ මොකක් හරි දෙයක් වෙනවා දකින්න එක. Right? Master something කියන්නේ මොකක් හරි දෙයක් හොඳට කරන එක. ඒ දේ කරලා ඒකේ හොඳටම පුළුවන් වෙනවා කියන්නේ master කරන එක. To stem from something කියන්නේ මොකක් හරි පටන් ගන්න එක නැත්නම් හැදෙන එකක්. Right? So, let's have a look at the few questions. Circle the best answer to these questions. What do we learn about the structure of the brain? About structure brain. Right. So, all neurons are activated when we think එහෙමනම් කියන්නේ, right? Because they don't say that all our neurons are activated, right? They say that there are neurons and that these neurons have several branches. හැබැයි ඔක්කොම activate වෙනවා කියලා නම් කියවෙන්නේ නැහැ. So, I would not go with A. Okay? So the structure of the brain is compared to a tree? No, right? That the structure of the brain changes, right? So it says that our brain structure changes dramatically as we grow up, okay? It doesn't say when we send a message. So I would not take this, but I would go with D. Because yes, they come in contact. එක message එකක් යවනකොට මේ neuron එකෙන් අනිත් neuron එකට messages යවනවා, right? What does the second paragraph tell us? Okay. Brain development is an ongoing process. Babies are born with the capacity to do anything. I don't think they are born with the capacity to do anything. And that's not in the it is, and they say almost neurons. Why? That is why they can't do very much. So that is definitely not an answer. ඒගොල්ලන්ට වැඩි දේවල් කරන්න බෑ. A reduction in connections between neurons help babies to learn how to speak. A reduction in communication. No. Number of connections go, and that is why they can talk. So definitely that's wrong. Okay. It is no longer believed that most changes in the brain occur before adulthood. Despite earlier, we now know that it comes perhaps even to puberty. So we know that now. ඒ හින්දා වැරදි. Brain development is an ongoing process. Yes, I would definitely take that. Okay. What does the text tell us about brain reorganization? Okay, අපි බලමු reorganization වලට ගිහිල්ලා brain here. ඉතින් ඒ කාලෙදි තමයි brain එක sudden increase එකක් වෙන්නේ. හරියට ගහක් වැවෙනවා වගේ ඉක්මනට වැවෙනවා. ඉතින් prune කරන්න ඕනේ. එක ගහක් වුණත් prune කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒ වගේ තමයි brain එකත්, right? So the more stronger actions and thoughts that you have, the more repetitive it will be, right? So with that understanding, let's have a look at it. It normally occurs in spring නෑ. ඒක example එකක් ගහට. When we engage in an activity, we strengthen connections in the brain. Could be as the number of neurons increase, the brain gets stronger. එහෙම කියන්නේ. People who play a musical instrument have stronger brain connections than those who play a sport. එහෙම කියන්නෙත් නෑ. So the most appropriate answer would be B. Okay. What does the writer imply in paragraph 3? So paragraph 3, the first one, second one, third one. So would say that, playing musical instruments, speaking another language, or learning computer games, complex games would be much easier, right? So just let's read the answers. Api balamu. All teens should play a musical instrument? No. It is just as difficult to speak another language as it is to play computer games. If we don't practice an activity in our teenage lives, we won't be able to do it as an adult. Teens can influence their own brain development. Let's see. This explains why you do something, the better you become at it. It could therefore be argued that teenagers determine the development of their own grey matter through the activities and experiences they engage in. I think teens can influence their own brain development. මොකද ඒගොල්ලෝ කරන activities හිතන පතන දේවල් මත තමයි ඒක තීරණය වෙන්නේ. So yes. Okay. During adolescence, what happens? All parts of the brain develop simultaneously. We can make emotional decisions because of our hormones. We gradually improve our ability to think in abstract terms. Not really. We are unable to carry out? No, we can carry out. All parts of the brain kind of develop simultaneously. It is also supposed to say the last part of the adolescent's brain develops the cortex responsible for self-control, problem-solving, and decision-making. Long before teens become adept to rational, abstract thinking and logical decision-making, they rely on emotional center of the brain to make choices. No. So adolescents, they rely on emotion. We make emotional decisions because of... It's not because of the hormones, it is because of the brain development, right? They are able to carry out problem-solving tasks. Let's see, abstract terms as well. Perhaps unpredictable, volatile, risk-taking teenage behavior often puts down hormones, may actually have more to do with it, yeah. So I think it's more to say that it doesn't really all parts develop simultaneously, but at this point I think looking at the answers, the most appropriate one would be A, right? Because it develops your cortex, but it does develop your frontal cortex more, right? Overall, writer thinks teenagers are misunderstood, want to learn more about the changes in their brains, are more intelligent, can benefit from understanding the changes that happen in their brains. So I think what he says, teenagers ගැන කියන්නේ ඒගොල්ලෝ unpredictable risk-taking behavior එකක් තියෙන්නේ ඒගොල්ලෝගේ hormones ඉඳ නෙවෙයි actually ඒගොල්ලෝගේ ඔළුවේ වැඩ කරන දේවල් එක්ක කියලා. Right? So that is the writer's view. So I think overall the writer thinks that teenagers are misunderstood. මොකද ඒගොල්ලෝ හිතන්නේ hormone ගැන එහෙම තියනවා කියලා. හැබැයි ඇත්තටම එහෙම එකක් නෙවෙයි තියෙන්නේ. ඇත්තටම තියෙන්නේ ඒගොල්ලන්ට brain එක ඒගොල්ලෝගේ තේරුම් ගැනීම අපි කරන්නේ නැතිකම. Right? So that's what the writer thinks. Okay, so that's multiple choice, and with that understanding, we go to practice question 6, right? So now here, what I really want you to do is try to understand things on your own. දැන් මෙතන තියෙනවා words ටිකක්, right? ඒ words ටික match කරන්න ඕනේ meanings වලට. Right, so let us quickly run through the passage. පොඩ්ඩක් කියවලා බලමු එතකොට meanings ටිකයි questions ටිකයි කරන්න පුළුවන්. Are UFOs real? UFOs කියන්නේ unidentified flying objects. Okay. No, of course not. නෑ, ඇත්ත නෙවෙයි කියලා තමයි ඒගොල්ලෝ කියන්නේ. The only place that you might find a UFO is in a science fiction story or in one of the latest Hollywood movies. ඉතින් ඇත්තටම අපිට UFO එකක් ගැන අහන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ Hollywood movie එකක එහෙමත් නැත්නම් පොතක, right? Sure, there are hundreds of blurry photographs. Blurry කියන්නේ clear නෑ, නිකන් blurred කියලා කියන්නේ නිකන් එහෙට මෙහෙට වෙලා වගේ තියෙන පින්තූර. Clear එකක් නෙවෙයි, right? බොඳ වෙලා වගේ තියෙන එක. And even a few videos කීපයකුත් තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. Of objects that some people claim to be UFOs, also known as unidentified flying objects or flying saucers. ඉතින් ගත්ත පින්තූර නැත්නම් ওই වීඩියෝස් ටිකක් තියෙන පුළුවන් මිනිස්සු කියන ඒවා UFO ඒවයි කියලා. But these are not real proof of the existence of visitors from other planets. හැබැයි මේවා ඇත්තම සාක්ෂි නෙවෙයි ආවා කියන එකට අනිත් planets වලින්. පිටසක්වල ජීවීන් ආවා කියන එකටම සාක්ෂි නෙවෙයි. These could be images of balloons, birds, aircraft or clouds. මේ ගත්ත පින්තූර aircraft එකක, බැලුමක, කුරුල්ලෙක්ගේ පින්තූර වෙන්න පුළුවන්. They might even be faked images. Faked කියන්නේ බොරු පින්තූර වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්. Anyway, why would aliens travel across the galaxy to Earth and then try to keep themselves hidden from eyes? ඉතින් ඇත්තටම ගත්තොත් ඇයි මේ පිටසක්වල ජීවීන් මෙච්චර දුර ගැලැක්සි එකක් හරහා ඇවිල්ලා හැංගිලා ඉන්නේ පෘථිවියට ඇවිල්ලා? It just doesn't make sense. කිසිම තේරුමක් නැති දෙයක්. These are just a few arguments that can be made against the claim that UFOs are real. ඉතින් මේවා තමයි අපිට UFOs ඇත්ත නෙවෙයි කියලා කියන්න පුළුවන් හේතු කිහිපයක්. However, there is growing evidence. හැබැයි දැන් එන්න සාක්ෂි වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා. And ඒවෙන් suggest වෙනවා UFOs are in fact very real. ඇත්ත කියලා කියනවා. First, many people say that the US military found a UFO and even the bodies of dead aliens that crashed in New Mexico in 1947. ඉතින් කියන ඇත්තටම ඇමරිකාවේ යුද හමුදාව මෙහෙම UFO සහ කියන්නේ aliens ලගේ මැරිච්ච bodies හමුනා කියලා නිව් මෙක්සිකෝ වල 1947. But that the American government has been keeping it a secret from the public. හැබැයි ඒගොල්ලෝ හංගලා තියනවා කියලා එක රහසක් මහජනයාගෙන්. The first collected evidence for the existence of flying saucers was published a few years later in 1950 by Major Donald Kehoe, a former military officer, in a book called The Flying Saucers Are Real. ඉතින් ඒ ගැන තියෙන ප්‍රථම සාක්ෂිය ඊට අවුරුදු කිහිපයකට පසුව 1950 පළවෙච්ච පොතක මේජර් ඩොනල්ඩ් කීහෝ කියලා ඒ කාලේ US වල හිටපු මිලිටරි ෆෝස් එකේ ඔෆිසර් කෙනෙක් එයා සඳහනක් කරලා තියෙනවා මේවා ඇත්ත කියලා මේ flying saucers. More recently in 2017, the US Navy shared videos of unidentified objects flying at extremely high speeds. ඉතින් 2017 වර්ෂයේ US වල Navy එක share කරා මේ පියාසර කරන unidentified objects. The videos were taken by Navy pilots over both the Pacific and the East Coast of the United States. ඉතින් Pacific එකේ East Coast එකේ තමයි අරන් තිබුණේ. ඉතින් ඒක බොහොම ඇත්ත නැතක පිළිගත හැක කියන එක තමයි මිනිස්සු විශ්වාස කරන්නේ. According to one of the pilots, one of the objects moved in a way that we couldn't explain. NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which was responsible for sending the first people to the moon, says that while there is no evidence to show for sure that UFOs are from other planets, neither is there evidence to show that they are not extraterrestrial origin. ඉතින් ඒක කියන්න බෑ කියලා තමයි කියන්නේ. Now this word extraterrestrial කියන එකේ තේරුම මොකක්ද කියන එක බලන්න. If you don't know, look it up from the dictionary. Finally, since the discovery of the first planet outside of our own solar system in 1992, thousands of more extrasolar planets have been found. ඉතින් අපේ first planet එක හොයාගත්තට පස්සේ එළියේ තව ගොඩාක් extra planets හොයාගෙන තියෙනවා. This, of course, greatly increases the possibility that aliens are visiting us. ඉතින් වෙන්න පුළුවන් පිටසක්වල ජීවීන් ඉඳලා එන්න පුළුවන් කියන මතේ හින්දා තියෙනවා. And this raises an important question: if aliens are really visiting us, are they friendly and should we welcome them or should we worried? ඉතින් එතකොට ප්‍රශ්නේ එනවා මේ aliens ඇත්තටම හොඳ කට්ටියද? එන්න ඕන කට්ටියද? යාළු වෙන්න ඕන කට්ටියද? නැත්නම් අපි බය වෙලා ඉන්න ඕනේද ගැන? So we have those questions, right? Okay. So, blurry කියන්නේ not very clear. Unidentified කියන්නේ අපිට හඳුනාගත නොහැක. Not identified H. Right, so existence is the fact of being real, D. Faked is to make a false appear to be real. Okay. Galaxy is a large collection of stars in outer space, B. Evidence is facts that you believe something is true, so C. Right? Extraterrestrial means from or belonging to another planet, G. Extrasolar means located outside our solar system, F. Right. ඉතින් ඔය තියෙන්නේ වචන ටික තේරුම් ටික blurry, බොඳ වෙච්ච, unidentified හඳුනාගත නොහැක, existence කියන්නේ ඇත්තටම තියෙන දෙයක්, faked කියන්නේ බොරුව ඇත්ත හැටියට මවාපාන එක, galaxy කියලා කියන්නේ outer space වල තියෙන තරු ගොඩ ගණනාවක එකතුවක්, evidence කියලා කියන්නේ සාක්ෂි, existence කියන්නේ පැවැත්ම, right? Extraterrestrial කියන්නේ තව planet එකකින් අයිති වෙන දෙයක්, තව planet එකකට අයිති දෙයක්, belonging to another planet. නැත්නම් ඒ planet එකකින් එන දෙයක්. Extrasolar කියන්නේ අපේ solar system එකකින් එළියේ තියෙන ඒවා. Right? Okay, complete the statements. People think that UFOs are not real. සම්බන්ධ කරන්න. The US military may have found a crashed UFO in 1947. A former US military officer wrote a book about UFOs. US Navy pilots have taken පින්තූර අරන් තියෙනවා that they cannot explain. The discovery of thousands of extrasolar planets increase the possibility that UFOs exist. No one knows for sure whether or not aliens will be friendly. Okay? All right. So there we are. We have matched the sentence endings. දැන් ඕකත් IELTS වලට එන්න පුළුවන් තව type එකක්. Matching sentence endings. එච්චර prominent නැහැ. ඒ කියන්නේ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට දෙන style එකක් නෙවෙයි. හැබැයි එන්න පුළුවන්. Right? So we have practiced that. And then we matched matching activity එකක් කරා. Matching ටිකක් develop කරගන්න මොකද ඒක ඕනේ. Then we have done multiple choice questions. පොඩ්ඩක් අමාරුයි ටිකක් tricky questions ටිකක් තිබුණා එකේ. And then of course we had a look at another matching activity, short answered questions, right? And again short answered questions. Completing a passage using the given words නැත්තම් අපිට එතකොට හිතලා passage එකක් කියවලා කරන්න ඕනේ. මෙතන passage එකක් තිබුණ නැහැ. අපි තේරුම එන විදියට words දාලා complete කරා. Right? So this is understanding the vocabulary and the meaning. So with that, we come to the end of this lesson, science.